Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us, 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. My name's Julian Scott. I am Film London's animation consultant, and I'm here this morning to talk to three very well qualified people about whether you can run your passion, animation, as a business. And if so, how do you do that? And the three people I've got with me this morning are experts in this in different ways. The first person I'm going to mention is somebody who's done it. That's Phil Dobree. Phil founded JellyFish Pictures in 2001. He's overseen its growth to become one of the world's most respected VFX and animation studios. Phil's also a board member of Animation UK and UK Screen. He was an original council member of Creative England on the advisory board of Escape Studios and BAFTA's VFX chapter. We've also got Denitsa Yordanova from the BFI. Denitsa joined BFI in June 2021 when she was appointed the head of UK Global Screen Fund, which, as you may know, is a £7 million per year initiative of the UK government and the British Film Institute. She's got over 10 years of experience in the media and entertainment industry. She's working across strategy, corporate development and investments. And she's worked with leading corporate development and strategy roles, most recently in independent TV production at All 3 Media and Endemol Shine. And lastly, but not leastly, Nick Cavander from Creative UK. Nick's an investment manager at Creative UK's investment arm, Creative Growth Finance, and he's been there since 2020. Prior to that, he was in the film and TV creative marketing space, working agency side on trailers, TV spots, and digital campaigns for films, including Avatar, Rush, and hundreds of other UK and global releases. So, welcome, panel. Thank you very much for joining me. One of the things I like to do when I start these panels, just because they can be a little bit serious, is a bit of a game for the audience. There's no prizes, I'm afraid, of sort of who it was. So just before we start, I'm just going to give you three statements, one of which relates to one of the panelists. And your job, as we talk this morning, is to try and figure out which one of these people did this particular thing. And at the end, we'll get them to own up. So one of our panelists was a rock musician with airplay and sync placements on Don Johnson's TV series, Nash Bridges. One of our panelists has lived on both sides, both coasts of the United States of America. And one of our panelists was christened in Jerusalem and spent the first 10 years of their life in Beirut. So, as well as listening to their incredible advice and opportunities that they can hopefully give you in terms of turning your passion into a business, if that's what you want to do, you have to try and figure out who was that person. Anyway, onwards. Phil, if I could start with you, please. As I mentioned earlier on, you are the founder of JellyFish Pictures, a studio I have visited on numerous times down in Brixton and seen the real jellyfish. Would you just give us a sort of a potted history of why you got into animation and why and how in the last 21 years you have turned your passion into a really, really successful business?
Thanks, Julian. Hi, everyone. On this Saturday morning, I'm going to show you a few slides which will help me, prompt me to tell you a bit more about that question and answer it a little bit more fully. I think perhaps many of you listening in this morning, you do start doing this because you are passionate about it and it's a creative endeavor that you really want to make stuff. For me, it was very much that was the incentive. I loved what I did. I came from I was an artist myself. I was an animation practitioner from 30 years ago. So I got into it originally from graphic design. And I was at the what it used to be called the London College of Printing back in the day, at the same time as someone called Neville Brody. Some of you may have heard of, a very famous graphic designer who helped set up The Face magazine and ID and that sort of thing. And so I was very much involved in 2D flat images in those days, and you couldn't use a computer to get anything moving. And I didn't come from a cell animation or drawn animation background at all. It was all about stills. But computers were just in their sort of nascent period, and they just started to be used for graphic design. And that point, things started to go a bit different, and saw the potential for moving images with graphics and computer animation. And so I did a course way back 30 years ago almost now in computer animation, one of the only ones in the country at Epsom College of Art. It was weekends and evenings. And from there really got into it. And then I've always been someone who prefers doing things on my own than working with or for other people in companies. I had a sort of I've always had an entrepreneurial drive. And that has meant that I've, always had a sort of eye on the business side as well, or at least having an independent enterprise rather than thinking, oh, well, I would do it differently. And you go into these things when you're very, you're small setup and you've got your own passion, you're doing your own work, and you're creating projects in a small way, and you kind of ignore the business side of it a little bit, or you think, well, you can work hand to mouth successfully because your overheads are very small. You just got to pay. Potentially, you might even be working from home, or you might be working in a very small studio or sharing a studio in a workspace environment. And that's a very good way to start. It's a very sensible thing to do. And I'm just going to share the screen now. I hope everyone can see that. Okay. There we go. I hope that's working. So, back in 2001, set up JellyFish and we literally were in a very tiny little back cupboard alcove in the back of a company called CTV up in St John's Wood. They lent us a room at the back there, and the rent was nothing. It was zero, and that's a good way to start. Keep your overheads costs right down, and that kind of prudent kind of way of doing things is a sensible way. It means that you kind of feel like everything you're earning from the work you're doing, you can keep your costs down, you can be competitive when you bid for work, and you can be nimble and agile. As you start to get more projects in and things go well and your clients like you and things are going well, you naturally then take on bigger projects, and things just organically grow, and they start to get out of, I wouldn't say out of control, but you start to have to find more people. You start to have to deal with a whole lot of things you didn't think you'd ever had to deal with when you started out. You start to have to deal with personnel, people problems there, you become responsible for them. You start to then be responsible for their income, their well-being, their salaries. And then you start to think, well, we have to make a sustainable business, and how do we grow in the future? And we need a bigger office space, and how do we pay for that? There's all these things that come in and become part of setting up a business that maybe when you started out, you didn't completely figure you'd have to do. And that is something that is, I think you have to almost, if you've not come from a business background, you almost have to go back to school, teach yourself that, because actually there's a lot of opportunities to learn out there, whether they're part-time courses or groups you can be part of. I joined something called the Association of Chief Executives a little bit too late, which is now called Vistage, and you just hear other business owners and entrepreneurs' experiences and advice, and you get a lot from that. And then you get into this position where, okay, you get to a point where you have to seek, you probably will want to borrow money. I mean, we were very careful. We were very prudent for many years. For 15 years, we really didn't borrow much money at all. And that's not necessarily a good thing. You kind of, if you want to grow, you do at some point need to go out and find investment. To this point that we didn't even lease any equipment. We bought all our computers, everything outright. We had a really, really prudent approach. And it was only about 7 years ago, probably, that we started to say, okay, and at that point, we were over 100 people. We started to, those principles are good, but all these reasons why you probably might want to seek an investment, or go and find money to grow quicker. It allows you to do that much more, and it can be a little bit scary. And you think, okay, you're building up this debt. Working capital just means cash in the bank. Hopefully, maybe during the pandemic, people got into that situation where jobs dried up and they needed to borrow money, and that's a working capital example there. Purchase fixed assets, that's computers, equipment, everything like that. It's a very common reason for finding for getting investment or financial support. You might want to move your office, grow office, which has happened to us frequently on about 6 or 7 different occasions. Each time we got another office, another one, rather than getting something sizable, and maybe we should have done that and say, okay, we'll just do one move, borrow more money and work it that way. But the 6 or 7 years ago, doing that move to start borrowing money and either leasing equipment or borrowing to improve premises, we did all that. So we went into a much bigger studio, the one that Julian mentioned in Brixton. We got all our tech now is a very, very sort of state of the art, and has been for the last 6-7 years. So it's all off site. There's a whole new cost that we did there, but all this kind of investment helps you to set up and be bigger and stronger for the future. And then so that those first year at the top is what I would describe as that's something you might call debt funding, which basically means you borrow money principally from your bank or from a kind of higher purchase type financial support. There's many that will, whenever you buy computers, there's normally the supplier will hook you up with someone who will do that as part of them selling computers to you. And then if you want to get into okay, we don't want to actually get into any more debt, we don't want to borrow any more money, your other alternative is to do something called equity release, which is basically sell shares in your business. But to sell shares in your business or part of your business, you really want to think, and a lot of business owners are very reluctant to do that because they don't want to give up part of their business, and you have to decide how much and how valuable is it and how much will you get, and you have to kind of make that decision. You have to be in a pretty good position from a company point of view to say, okay, we're worth something, so at this point I'm going to cash in a bit. I'm going to say, yeah, rather than borrow anymore and get any more debt, it's probably a good point now to say we can go and sell part of the business. And that can be a bit of a daunting thing, but you get to reasonable size to do that. And I think Nick will probably go into that. If you're smaller, what you can do in terms of borrowing. We never even explored that. Actually, we never saw that as an option. We waited till we were fairly sizable, and we were profitable enough to have a reasonable value, which meant that by letting go of part of the business, we could get a lot of cash, or reasonable amount of cash, into the business to invest and grow that much more. For me, it was a bit of time, 20 years running the company, to get some cash out, which was welcome. And it's almost like cashing in your chips in Monopoly or something. You de-risk a bit. At this point, you want to say, okay, I want to de-risk a bit, cash in a few chips, and then help to grow to the next. And you're getting on a partner who's also going to be helpful in terms of they're going to really be supportive, you hope, to take you to the next level, because they are part of the equity in your business. They're invested in it. They're going to be very, very focused on making sure you succeed, because they've only invested for one reason, to grow the business so they can get their money back. So it's not a scary thing. It can be a good thing. And there are a number of things that you need to do, and again, Nick and Denitsa, I think we'll go into more detail on these aspects. But when you do get to that point where you say, okay, you need to borrow money, you need to then go and prove that you are profitable, that your financial affairs are all in good order, that your books are good, that your legal, all the tax things are it's like being ready for an exam, really. You have to get all your house in order. It's like when you sell your house, if you want to do the best job, you sell your car, you want to go and make sure it's in good running order and everything's in place and the records are right and all that sort of thing. And, you know, there's the bit in pink there is more about, okay, how that's a less tangible part of the valuation, but equally important. Where are you? You know, where's your standing? You want to make sure that, you know, there's clients who will vouch for you and say how great you are, because they will go and do that level of diligence as well. Quite likely they want to get references, and some very, very detailed. And you need to know that your team around you in your company is also presentable. And it's all about, you know, your values brand. It's a real you know, house cleaning sort of job for your business, to make sure everything is totally in order. And it's better to do that before you go out, and to do that as you go along. You build your business to always do all these things right, because you've got to think at some point in the future, unless you just want to muddle along being a lifestyle business forever, you need to look at it from a more corporate thing, which may be uncomfortable for people as a creative and not the reason they got into business, but that is absolutely something you need to be doing. I think that's probably my time, Julian. I don't want to eat into other people's for the moment, but that's sort of the journey to us getting to a point where, and I'm sure there may be questions about all this, but there's a lot more there but to talk about. But I think for me, it's about, you start a creative business, good to have the foundations, the principles of being prudent, being careful. But if you're too careful, you're going to go slower. You know, take a few risks, borrow money. But if you borrow money, make sure your house is in order. You've got all your things lined up, your affairs lined up, particularly your financial affairs, and don't go and do any equity release. You want to do it when you're worth something, not when you're worth nothing, because you'll have to give away an awful lot for not very much.
Brilliant, Phil. Thank you so much. That's been really, really interesting. I'd like to move on to Denitsa in just a sec and talk about what the BFI are doing. But I just wanted to say two things. I completely forgot at the beginning to say, if anybody in the audience has got any questions, please do put them into the chat, and I'll get them and I'll try and put them to our panelists. But Phil, the other thing I just wanted to ask you very, very quickly is, as the founder of a business and the sort of the creative and business driver, as the business grows, how do you stop suffering from what I would call founderitis, which is the inability to let go? How have you dealt with that?
Well, that's a great question, and something I didn't mention actually either, is you have to be honest with yourself about what your strengths and weaknesses are, or where you think you are best placed to put your efforts, and admit that, okay, I need to get help, and be very objective about it. And it's very difficult when it's your baby, you know, for a lot of people who set up a business, or it's very, you've got to sort of let go a bit and not be too possessive, and say, okay, you might need to get someone in who is you may be a CEO or maybe an MD, somebody comes in and helps you with the business. That is a huge thing. Or someone who helps you with the financial aspect of the business, who knows that stuff. I always believe in using experts, and I think, you know, it can take a long time for you to take. That's almost the first investment you need to make. If you haven't got those skills, make that investment first. Someone who's got a really good financial, legal, not so important, but business kind of strategic approach to how to help you grow a successful business. And it's not about just profit. It's about, do you want to just have the business die with you? When you leave, the business goes, or do you want to create something which is generational or that will go on beyond you? And if you do, then you have to be honest with yourself.
Brilliant, Phil. Thank you so much. That's been really, really helpful. Thank you. So moving on, Denitsa, you've obviously heard Phil. You've funded, well, you put some money into a couple of animation companies. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you do, why you do it, and how people out there who are looking for some investment could approach you and what you're looking for?
Thank you very much, Julian, and thank you, Phil, for this comprehensive overview of the funding options for animation businesses, which I think will be quite helpful to position both the funding that we provide at the BFI, but also what Nick is going to talk about a little bit later on. So I represent a fund which is very new, actually. It only got launched last year, so we're in our second year of operations. And what we're trying to do is to provide support for international growth activities. So that might sound a little bit unusual to those of you listening and trying to figure out where do you fit in this debt and equity kind of capital raising structure. And the answer is we're actually at a very different spectrum. So the UK Global Screen Fund provides non-recoupable funding for international growth strategies in various different forms, and I'll explain the program as a whole. But basically, it is neither debt nor equity. It is a grant, which means you get to keep all of it without having to give anything away. However, it does come with certain strings attached in terms of what you need to achieve, which is around international growth of your revenues or audiences, reach, partnerships, so very much internationally focused metrics, and also with certain reporting obligations and expectations. So you have to go through similar processes as the ones to, for example, raise equity, which involve making a business plan or a project plan and then delivering against it to unlock further funding. So it's almost like a light stage preparation for the journey you'll have to undertake when you are ready to give away some of your equity. So you're doing it in a slightly scaled back way and then getting some of the same experiences and having to address some of the same challenges early on. So our fund is financed by the UK government, by the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. But if you think of it, how do we sit in relation to the other BFI funds, such as the Film Fund? It's a separate source of funding. So it is not lottery funded. Therefore, the good cause mission, while it still exists, is not as prioritized. And we have a certain set of more commercial objectives, which are focused more on international growth. And that's what is being measured, and that's what's being assessed in all of our applications. We support animation companies across all three of our funding strands. Our funding program is about $5.5 million, and it's three separate funding pathways. So we have a international distribution pathway, which is focused on UK films. Looking to make international sales and to be distributed internationally, and we support them to enhance their marketing and press kits and materials to secure those international sales. And then we support them with support for print and advertising of the international distributors if there's at least a minimum number of distributors interested. So that's your international distribution strand. Then we have an international co-production strand, which supports feature films in all genres, where the UK is a minority partner on the financial share side, so up to 49%. And we also support TV projects, which is quite new for the BFI, but only in the genres of animation and documentary. So good news for animation, not so good news for high-end TV drama, because there's a lot of money in that sector. So we're prioritizing documentary and animation for TV. And there the UK partner can be a minority or majority contribution in terms of the financial contribution. And thirdly, and most importantly, is our strand that provides support for businesses, which I think is most relevant to this discussion. And that support is across the whole screen ecosystem, so film, TV, animation, but also interactive narrative games, distribution. And the support is for international growth strategies, which span 3 years. And lead to an increase in international revenues, reaching more audiences, creating content that travels internationally and can be monetized, and also forming new lasting international partnerships. And the supporting these strands is, as I said, non-recoupable funding. But for the business development strand in particular, which provides support for companies, you have to prepare a 3-year business plan, somewhat similar for the type of exercise you have to do when you seek equity investment. And you have to achieve certain key performance indicators or milestones in your journey towards realizing your strategy in order to unlock funding. I might actually pause here, Julian, because I think it would be good to get questions and then direct the conversations to that might be more interesting to your audience, and also give a chance to Nick to share his experience as well. I think you're on mute.
Unmic myself, that would be useful. Technology never been a strong point. Thank you, that's fascinating. I mean, I have to be honest, as somebody who, you know, well, about 18 months ago, I did a strategy, animation strategy for Film London. And one of the things that was brought up by the stakeholders who contributed to that thing was they didn't feel at the time that maybe the BFI was giving as much support as they would have liked to animation. And it's really, really good to hear how much effort and time and hopefully money you now can put in, because I think it's a real sort of opening of a nice big pot that people can dabble into. One of the things that you mentioned there, and also you know, Phil mentioned in his presentation, was the sort of the business side of things. And you know, Phil mentioned that, you know, one of the ways, you know, you have to bring people in who are experts and who've got skills and things like that. You mentioned business plans. Now, you know, somebody who's been doing making animated shorts or put their first animated project together, possibly on a sort of a production by production basis. The thought of putting a business plan together might be quite daunting. They might not know where to start, or, you know, without trying to sound patronizing, not even know what a business plan is if that's not where you've come from. And again, Phil mentioned, you know, creativity and entrepreneurial spirit and business acumen have to sort of run together in order to build a business. What are you looking for in a business plan?
It's a good question. And just to come back on your first point, actually, Julian, in terms of animation companies being supported by a fund, I mean, the UK animation ecosystem is really vibrant and really creative. And I think you could see it also in our first year awards, our top award in both business development, but also in the co-production strand, that they both went to animation companies and projects, and actually has represented a very big part of our funding and our awards. And what we're looking for when we assess applications across all of our funding strands, it's actually the same set of criteria which are published in our guidelines. They have slightly different weighting, but the number one criteria, which also underpins the business plan, and it's not what people expect. Perhaps when I say business plan now, they start thinking about financial metrics. It's actually international growth. So your strategic narrative must match your financial plan. And if those two are not connected, and there is, you know, one is speaking to achieving the heights of ambition that the other doesn't support, that is almost a non-starter. So you have to, even when you think about not just our fund, but any other form of investment, debt or equity, be very clear what you're trying to accomplish, and then tie that to a tangible strategy for achieving it. I think we all realize that, you know, financial forecasting is kind of not an exact science. It is always based on a set of assumptions. So nobody's going to really hold you to in account if you know you're 10K or 20K short of your projections. But if your projections are based on a narrative that marries the type of projects you're looking to realize over the next 3 to 5 years, the likelihood of when those might happen, that's the first start for what we're looking at a business plan, is actually link between the reality of your slate, of the ideas you're generating, and a path to monetizing them that's consistent. And you may make some assumptions about the probability of those happening if you have, you know, more than one. I think for animation companies, that might be even a bit easier because you're probably working on 1 or 2 big things and not on, slate of 16 things, ideas that are in various shapes and formats of maybe being realized. But it is a path towards a slate that is getting monetized and that somebody is picking up, whether that's a broadcaster or a studio, and you're working with them on realizing it over X years and then overlaying those projects together to build up a picture of revenue. And I think that's probably the most challenging part. The cost side, people usually have a pretty good grip on because they know what they're spending on, but it's more how do you go from this, well, I'm working on this one project to actually I have several ideas. Those are in discussions with broadcasters. This is likely to be greenlit in the next year, and then building that into a almost like a waterfall of all of these things combined create my revenue. Once you do that and you know your cost, that you're basically almost 90% into your business plan, and then you just have to think about liabilities and the balance sheet items and how they translate into the P&L. But it's not really that challenging. But however, if you are working on the production, you don't have the bandwidth to think that way. So that's where getting support is really important, or going through these programs which break it down into elements that train you how to do this. Unfortunately, we don't provide training programs, but there is quite a lot already in the industry. And I think it's valuable to at least have that experience of knowing what it's asking for, so you know where your weakness is. And then maybe through that finding somebody who's strong and who can support you, or a part-time CFO or somebody that's a consultant to just explain to you how do you go from point A to point B. They will need your input though, because they have to connect reality with the ambition. That's a somewhat long-winded answer, but I hope addressed a lot of the points.
No, it's not long-winded at all. I actually think it simplifies the ask, because I think you're right. A lot of people, when they said, "Oh, you need to provide a business plan," they think of something which you've got to put through, to the stock exchange or something like that. And it sounds more like what you're looking for is, the dream, and the dream being connected to the reality somehow. So the dream is, in 5 years' time, I want to have these 3 projects off the ground, and somebody saying, okay, so let's mark out when that's going to happen in terms of a timescale, and what are you going to need in order to achieve that? Who are you going to need in order to achieve that? And sort of plotting things out. And I suppose if you start with the timescale, and then you can start saying, well, to get from 2022 to 2023, I'm going to need these 3 things. And then you can start to say, well, that's going to cost this and that's going to cost that. And I suppose once you start and you talk to somebody who can help you, it begins to make a lot more sense. And I know you said that you don't actually sort of offer, I think you said you don't offer the resources specifically to help people create business plans, but you presume, I would imagine in your guidelines, it says the kind of things that you're looking for. So somebody could take that from your website and go to somebody who could help, a consultant or whoever, and say, right, this is what I need to deliver. This is what I want to do. Can you help me marry the 2 up?
Yes, we do have it in our guidelines, but also what we do, because it's, guidelines are, a document that people find daunting because there's all sorts of language there and requirements and weightings. We do webinars when we open our transfer applications, and we keep it open for 3 months. So we're doing webinars both online, but we also go in person, and we try to explain every single element, show what the template looks like, get people comfortable so they're not daunted. What we don't do is individual bespoke feedback.
Yeah, sure.
We might incorporate this in the future because we realize that that's a need of the industry to actually get a bit more guidance. But as you said, it is really not rocket science. It's not forensically audited for our fund. It has to make sense. It has to be coherent. I think the more you grow and the more important your kind of funding needs become, and the bigger they become. So this trajectory that Phil was describing, that you get to the equity stage where your equity is worth something and you're about to give away a chunk, that's where it really starts getting forensically examined.
Yeah, sure.
And that's the next stage that probably Nick could also talk to you about, because the more people put in own equity or debt, and they expect a return, and they have investors who also expect a return, the more important it becomes that the margin of error is smaller. For us, it is, we want the aspiration to be realistic. We want it to be international. We want it to be measurable. But, it's still not, as a financial due diligence that Phil was describing, with all of these really in-depth examinations that comes a little bit later in your journey, when you're actually, people are putting their own money into you that they expect to be returned. We expect you to achieve the milestones and to make more money than the money we put in, but we are not necessarily going to have a stake in your company to have board meetings and beat you over the head about the achievement of that. The grant is, between 50 and 200,000. So it is not, 25% of your company in most instances, but it is important to unlock that growth and this capacity that you need to scale for international growth.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I will come back to at the end, so just so you can let us know where people can access information about the fund and everything else, which I'm sure is clear. But I'm going to move on to Nick, if I could now. Nick, your investments, they're not grants, are they? They are investments, commercial investments, and you're a commercial entity that I assume would expect to see returns on those commercial investments. Would you tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you do it? And similar to what I asked Denitsa, what you're looking for in companies and animation studios in order for you to be able to invest in them.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Absolutely. So I will put a deck up really shortly that covers all of that. But it's really interesting hearing both Phil and Denitsa talk, because there's elements in what we do that they both covered in different ways, such as when the type of investment you need is right for where you are on your journey. I thought Phil's deck on that really nailed it, and also equally Denitsa's on how you can put forth a financial plan that summarizes the thinking into the future, because that's so important to everybody, whether whatever type of finance you're talking about. And it's also, as I know firsthand, being in the film and TV space, how difficult it is. And we look at film and TV companies all the time, and we see how difficult it is, especially in creative businesses, to be able to think, over what's going to happen each month in the next 32 months. And I think that puts a lot of companies under pressure and makes them think, oh, it's just not worth it. I shouldn't do. I can't be bothered to do it. It's too difficult. And I think what I would say is, as a solution to that, if it's at all helpful, is that sometimes it's as much about the thinking as it is about, predicting the future. And if what you can do is look at your next 36 months, and I'm going to use 36 months because that's 3 years. That's generally what people want to see, sort of 2 or 3 years. If you can look at the next 3 years and make some assumptions about what you think the total revenue is going to be for the business, and then chop that up into 4 pieces for each year and kind of, make some educated guesses about which months they might land, you're 90% of the way there from people who are evaluating these on the other side. Because what they'll see is they'll understand that, the timings might slip, and we get that about production businesses. But what we'll see, or anyone will see, is that there's some thought there and some assumptions that make sense, and that's what they're looking for. So I'm going to quickly put my deck up here and try and share my screen. Always a fun exercise. I think what we cover in this deck is, it basically answers those things that Julian spoke about. I just make sure. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up if you can. Great. Right. So we're Creative Growth Finance. Now, we are part of Creative UK, who used to be Creative England, or best known as Creative England, and we went through a branding change end of last year. We specialize in all creative sector companies, and see ourselves as a specialist investor across animation, games, VFX, film and TV, etc. And specifically, we want to invest more into animation companies, but our place and timing for that is when they need cash for capital expenditure to help, fit out, kit or office space, to hire more staff, and potentially develop IP, which, it it needs to, the IP development really needs to be in conjunction with some other kind of working capital need, because we're investing in the business, but I'll come into that a little later on in the deck. But I would say that really we're the perfect, perfect for animation companies who want to cash flow that growth and are looking at equity, but thinking, maybe it's too early to start giving up, percentages and cashing out. We'd like to retain that ownership. We'd also like to retain that creative control and not have equity investors coming in and telling us how to do what we do. We haven't invested in many so far, but we want to invest in more. And over to the right, Fourth Wall Animation is a really good company that we invested in a couple of years ago. And I think it's a good reference point because they, on one side of the business, own a lot of IP and children's book titles, but on the other side of the business, they were able to exploit those IP and turn them into broadcast returning animation series. So that's a really good example of a company and a model that can work. I realize that not everybody's in a lucky enough position to have existing IP in their company, but the other thing that companies should look at and consider as they're growing is whether or not they can provide services as a backup for revenues while they develop IP. That's a really good model that we take a lot of comfort in when we're looking at potential investments. I've also put Moonraker up there. They're a VFX company, but they're in the earth sciences space, but very similar type of model as to doing VFX services, but also wanted to develop their own IP. And we're able to do both using our investment. So I've included them there. Right. This slide is really about a little bit kind of echoing what Phil was talking about earlier, and a bit inspired by what the kind of stuff he was covering about, when do you use what and how do you progress? How do you grow up? And so I thought I'd lay it out as the investment stages. You sort of have your first stage, the startup phase, where you're getting your business together. Maybe you're developing a title, and you might get some seed investment or even grant money from some of the various sources out there, but we're talking small grants and maybe fairly small seed investment from friends and family. And this is what we typically view as companies being pre-revenue or just very first project revenue. That's stage one. Stage two, trading, I called it. That's where an IP is released or something's happened. There's commercial traction in the business. There's recurring revenue in the business, meaning that, every month or two, money's coming in. You've got a predictable P&L. People can kind of see that things are happening. And that's when companies could be looking at either debt or equity investment. And this time the equity is not so much friends and family seed, but it's now starting to be venture capital or private investors who want to take a more active role in the business. Stage two kind of flows naturally into stage three, where you're growing, debt still potentially an option to cash flow the business. And again, it's the same pool of equity, private and VC, who are looking to take a percentage of the company and give you money. And then there's sort of stage four, which is kind of, where JellyFish is probably now and previously, which is, series level equity raise, where you're really raising significant amount of money to do significant expansion. And, that's kind of the next level, really. So I thought what I would sort of put forth is that we come in stages 2 and 3, which is that sort of just getting some traction in the revenue in the business and growing, but still not at stage 4, obviously. And I think that the key point about taking is this question, do you take debt? Do you take equity? People are afraid of debt because they think of banks, being very predatory, and they're afraid of equity because they think of the interference and the dilution. And what I would say is we're sort of an alternative to to higher purchase loans. We're an alternative to bank lending, and we're an alternative to equity. And the reason is that we provide cash in a way that, as a supportive lender, a collaborative lender, and in a way that saves you having to give up dilution, obviously, on the equity side. But also presence in a business can often give endorsement for future equity raises. VC investors like when they see, a well-aligned debt investor in there because of the due diligence that's required for us to take a position. And debt also allows companies to retain early control. But, so I would say it's not something to be frightened of, but it is something to think about in terms of the debt has to be serviced every month. And again, that's where that forward thinking and that forward looking plan are so important, because that's what we're looking at every time when companies come to us. We're saying, how are you going to be able to pay this back? If we give you, several £100,000, how can that be serviced, as well as the cost of running the business? And again, that just really echoes what Denitsa was saying earlier about having that forward-looking plan and really, having a strategy to deal with that. I think I'll talk quickly about our offer next. It's like I said, it's for that sort of middle 2 and 3 stage. So, it's not for everybody, obviously, but let me quickly hit, there we go. So basically what we offer, I'll just quickly whiz through this. If you are interested in it, please do follow up and find us and talk to us. Because like I said, we are looking to do more in the animation space. It's one that we really, really like and think has brings a lot of value to the UK film and TV space, and it's an area we'd like to be doing more. So we make loans of up to 500K. We can use 6-month capital repayment holidays to help people just have a little bit of a cash cushion when they do that. Rates are a little punchier than a bank, but we're a much more collaborative and supportive lender than a bank as well. So our rates are, tend to land in between those numbers there. It says 7 to 15%. That's our deck. That's our marketing line. But, somewhere in the middle is probably reality. We can do loans up to 4 years or 3 years in some cases. The only thing that we take in addition is a 5% management fee. That's fairly standard with all debt products. We split the application stage into sort of 2 phases. So everyone doesn't have to put a ton of work in up front to find out where they stand. So we can, we have a very basic first stage, and we can give a decision usually in 3 days. And the last 2 bits I'll talk about a little bit more: extensive post-investment support and investor readiness and equity introductions. So I think this is about the post-investment value that we bring, and access to some of the other resources across the company, including investor readiness programs, which can help businesses. So if, for example, you're at that early stage 1 and you're moving into stage 2, starting to sell things, and money's coming in, and you want to raise money, but you're not quite sure how to do it. You're not quite sure about all the financial plans that need to be submitted, the sort of forward-looking thinking and strategy. We actually have programs in our creative enterprise side of the business, which are investor readiness programs that help every company at that stage understand what they need. It helps them get their pitch decks together. It helps them get their financial modeling and thinking together. So even though we're on the investment side and we're sort of looking for companies that have that all organized, we're happy to push people, over onto the other side to kind of get themselves in position. And what I would also say is that once companies take investment from us, we take an observational seat on their board, and we spend a lot of time just helping to make sure that their financial governance is right, that their tax positions are right, that all the reporting and processes in the books, and that was all the stuff that Phil was talking about in that due diligence section of his deck, which I thought was really, really good to remember, that those things really, really matter. And they don't feel like they matter early on because everybody's just making the stuff, and it's all about the creative execution, and it's all about selling the IP and getting that sort of forward progress creatively. But when it comes time to either take on cash or investment for the business, or indeed even sell it, the entities that play a role in that are going to come in and they're going to want to say, you know, okay, how did you guys get here? Where are all your company's house accounts, and where's all the sort of monthly management information that covers, you know, your P&L and your balance sheet and cash flows, and what's been the tax positions, and have you been getting, you know, tax relief along the way, and the tax credits that are available for animation and production, and on it goes. And so it's really important to have that stuff, you know, in order early on in the early days, because when things scale and as things progress and you're ready to make that move and take on some funding, whether it's debt funding or equity or both, to help sort of cash flow the business and get things moving, the people who have that money and are looking to deploy it are going to need all of those things. So we really try to take an active role in all the companies that we invest in and work with to make sure they're doing all of that. And I think, yes, one last slide. Just eligibility. That was something Julian asked for earlier. I mean, really simply, we're looking for registered limited UK companies with at least a year of accounts filed at Companies House and minimum annual turnover of around 300K. We're also looking for, you know, animation companies with a strong team, track record, you know, offering services and or IP development in the business, you know, good visibility on future project revenues, and crucially a desire to grow and scale the business. So not just producers who are kind of going project to project, but people who are really looking at, you know, creating a successful all-around business that does services or multiple IPs or whatever the case may be. But like I said, it's not going to be right for everybody. And really where we come in is in those middle stages, in between startup and huge expansion. We're sort of that middle leg of the journey to help get you some cash to grow, cash flow what you're doing, and not give up too much equity in the business. And that leads us to the final slide, which is, you know, contact details. And I'm going to try and disseminate this out so that everybody gets a copy and has my details there. But you can also find us at Creative Growth Finance online. And I think with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over.
Nick, thank you so much. That again was fantastic. Really interesting. I mean, a couple of things that you're right. Some of what you said reminded me a little bit of Dragon's Den, you know, like, well, you know, here's my pot of money. I'll come in, but I'm going to come in and I'm going to work with you. I'm going to try and help you, and sort of, as you said, you have an observational role on the board to ensure that, you know, things are going properly and give assistance and everything else. And I think you also mentioned, in fact, I'm sure you also mentioned that another part of your business does offer the sort of the business planning opportunity and things like that. So I think I'm right in saying that people can apply to the other chunk and say, I want to do this, and they will. Can you apply for a grant in order for someone to then, for the company to hire someone to come in and help them put the business plan together and things like that? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And sorry, it's hard to make that one clear always in these presentations. There's Creative UK as an umbrella organization that covers, you know, quite a different areas across policy to DCMS, investment, which is our group, which is we're backed by a commercial bank, and then the sort of core Creative England membership and business support services, which are actually have historically been funded in part by BFI. So, and that includes some of our investor readiness programs, such as Evolve, and there's a couple of different screen programs. And applicants to those programs, those are more public sector type of programs. Applicants to those can then also simultaneously apply for small grants, which I believe are up between 5 and 25K, depending on the program and the grants they need. And that money gets deployed exactly as you say, so that towards, you know, financial resources within our network to help companies build those financial models and those financial plans. So yeah, that is always a confusing thing about us, that the investment group is kind of, we're our own separate entity and we're sort of a commercial entity, but we're in the Creative UK umbrella. However, the rest of our business support programs sit over on the other side of the business. But we work very collaboratively across both sides. But yes, we for our purposes in the investment team are looking for companies that kind of have all of that work done and have, hence the annual revenue requirements and kind of year filed accounts and that sort of thing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's really, really useful. I mean, everybody, all three of you have spoken a lot about, from the get-go, you need to make sure that you've got the back room working properly and your accounts are sorted out, and that your legal affairs and your incorporation and your tax affairs are all as they should be. And it sort of made, again, as a producer, made me think, it's a little bit like making sure your chain of title is in place, with your intellectual property development. You can't go around, getting a mate to do your designs for you and another mate to write a script for your thing. You need to have agreements in place, simple agreements that say that you do actually have control over your intellectual property and the things that you are then asking people, if you're going out to broadcasters or other financiers on a per project basis, you've got to make sure that all these things, we got your ducks in a row. We've only got 3 or 4 minutes left. There's a few questions coming through about where people can access information from Denitsa and from UNIC, and I don't know whether it's all in our chat for the panelists here. I don't know whether everybody who in the audience can see it, but what I would say is, if anybody who wants to know more about any of this, if you want to email me, and my email address is animation@filmlondon, which is all one word, .org.uk. I can then direct you to Nick or to Denitsa, or if you've got a direct question for Phil, I might have to do some filtering on that so Phil's not bombarded with things. But one of the questions has come in, Phil, how can I make connections with JellyFish even if I'm unemployed? Is there an HR department or a jobs at JellyFish or something like that?
Just go to our website. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we welcome everyone and anyone who wants to know more about us and wants to learn about joining us at whatever stage they're at and how they can do that. So yeah, there is a job section on our website, which I hope is usable and easy to understand.
And what's that website? What's the web address?
JellyFishPictures.com.
You had to think about that, didn't you?
Yeah, because it's just changed from .co.uk to .com. I'm just thinking, well, both work now. Yeah, just got .com as well. Yeah,
brilliant. So listen, in the last couple of minutes, Phil, very, very quickly, you brilliantly laid out that timeline of what you've done. Is there any major thing that you wish you'd done differently, or were you just brilliant throughout the whole thing?
No. I think I said it. I alluded to it anyway. And Nick, if I wish I'd known Nick or that fund and Denitsa maybe 15 years ago, when we were at stage 2 and 3, we were stage 3 for a long time. Right. And we held off. We were probably too prudent, but getting someone, it's a good thing to do that kind of diligent stuff about, you just mentioned at the end there, getting all your house in order, getting all your books in order. And part of that is getting someone onto your board. And I actually got a couple of people onto a board. It may feel odd for a lot of small companies to think, right, we're going to do board meetings. Yeah. But start that discipline of doing board meetings quite early, whether it's monthly or whether it's quarterly or bi-monthly, whatever is suitable for you. Start doing that as a discipline, and you can do it at an out of office event, and you sit down and you start treating your work like a business as well as a creative enterprise. Look at it from a business point of view, and it can be a little bit of a mistake to say, right, in your 3-year plan, I think we've all said it, you need a 3-year plan. A 3-year plan is what you hang everything on. And both Denitsa and Denitsa spoke about it really clearly, and Nick, that you start to build the building blocks in that 3-year plan, and do it quite early, and actually the cost bit is complicated in our business. So, you know, it's not actually that there are lots of things you can miss, and you can miss your plan if you're not careful. If you do have to make sure that business model, and that's where you need to get in an accountant or someone financially who's brilliant at building these models. So your model is, and you might have to, as you grow, you might have to rebuild that 3-year model at different points as it gets more and more complex, as you start to have more and more people coming in. But but it is quite an art form to build that model. So I think don't be scared of taking on money early, and taking on debt is not, as everyone said, it's not the scary thing, you know, that you think should be. If it helps you grow, but just prudence is great. Be prudent by all means, but don't be scared of taking on debt. And if it's debt attached, as both Nick and Denitsa saying, where they are going to be involved and they're going to be helpful, actually, they're not like a bank will be a little bit more, you know, maybe, unless you've got a great relationship with your bank manager, which I hope everyone does. Often you're reluctant to take on that debt finance from a bank, whereas taking it from a person who really wants to understand your business and help, that's a great thing to do.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's really, really useful. Right. In the last, well, just overrun slightly, to answer my questions that I posed at the beginning, and I'm sure the audience have been thinking very hard about this. So out of the three of you, which one of you has lived on both coasts of the United States of America?
That would be me. I thought the more boring the facts, the more easy it will be to get wrong. But there were such exciting facts about everybody else that I feel underwhelmed by mine. But yes,
not at all. But I think it's curious because, you know, I mean, everybody has a secret past. And talking of secret, well, not secret past, but which one of you was christened in Jerusalem and spent the first 10 years of their life in Beirut?
That was me. So, I don't know. So it's a strange one, that one, but yes, it's just a contrast to be christened in Jerusalem. I'm not particularly religious, but the fact you're christened in Jerusalem, then you live in Lebanon, they're quite contrasting countries. But yeah,
so by process of elimination, Nick, you must be the rock musician who worked on Johnson TVC's Nash Bridges.
Yes, you've got me. And I also lived on both coasts of the US. When I heard that, I almost went, yeah, that's me. Oh wait.
Brilliant. Well, listen, guys, I can't thank you enough for giving up your Saturday morning. It's great to see you as you know, friends from the business and hear what you've got to say. I think it's been really, really enlightening. Thank you so much. Thanks again to NAG and everybody at the festival for giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys, and to give you the opportunity to tell us what you've been up to. It's been really useful. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.